A lot of independent artists chase growth without stopping to question what that growth actually represents. More followers, more streams, more views, more engagement. On the surface, it looks like things are moving in the right direction. Numbers are going up. Visibility is increasing. People are paying attention. But growth doesn't always mean progress. You can grow an audience without improving stability. You can grow attention without building leverage. You can grow visibility without moving any closer to sustainability. That disconnect is one of the most frustrating parts of the independent journey, because it feels like you're doing what you're supposed to do and still not seeing meaningful change. Same income, same uncertainty, same pressure to keep up. Growth feels good because it's visible. You can screenshot it, you can celebrate it, you can point to it as proof that something is happening. Progress is quieter. It shows up in control, in clarity, in systems that make your next move easier instead of harder. The danger is confusing one for the other. When growth becomes the goal instead of the outcome, artists start building for applause instead of stability. They chase spikes instead of structure, moments instead of momentum. This episode is about learning how to tell the difference, how to recognize when growth is actually moving you forward, and when it's just noise. Because once you understand that difference, your strategy changes. And when your strategy changes, effort starts to feel purposeful instead of exhausting. Metrics are easy to focus on because they give instant feedback. Follower counts, view numbers, stream totals, likes and comments. They update constantly, and they make it feel like progress is measurable. When numbers go up, it feels like validation. When they slow down, it feels like something is wrong. But metrics don't automatically reflect meaning. A number can increase without strengthening your foundation. A spike can happen without changing your situation, and attention can grow without creating stability. That's where a lot of independent artists get confused. They assume growth in metrics equals progress in reality, but metrics only tell part of the story. They show visibility, not control. They show reach, not retention. They show attention, not commitment. Meaning shows up differently. Meaning shows up when people return consistently, when they recognize your message, when they support beyond a single interaction. Meaning is harder to track, but it's more important, because meaning is what turns an audience into a base. When artists chase metrics without understanding meaning, they start making short-term decisions. They optimize for clicks instead of connection. They chase engagement instead of alignment. They follow advice without asking if it fits their stage. That's how strategy becomes reactive. Metrics are useful, but only when you know what they represent. When you don't, they become distractions. Understanding the difference between numbers that look good and signals that actually matter is one of the most important skills an independent artist can develop. Because once you learn how to read metrics correctly, you stop chasing growth for its own sake, and you start building progress that actually lasts. Attention is powerful, but it's also misleading. A spike in views, a surge in engagement, a moment where everything feels like it's finally clicking. That kind of attention feels like progress because it's loud. People are reacting. Numbers are jumping. Momentum feels real. But attention doesn't last on its own. And when artists build strategies around moments instead of systems, progress stalls. This is the attention trap. Artists start making decisions based on what performs well instead of what builds long-term value. They repeat what spikes. They chase what trends. Well, they adjust their identity to match what gets the most response. At first, that feels smart. But over time, it creates instability. Because attention is reactive. It depends on algorithms, timing, and external factors you don't control. When attention drops, and it always does, artists feel lost. They start questioning their direction. They scramble for the next spike. They confuse silence with failure. But silence doesn't always mean nothing is happening. It often means the work has shifted below the surface. Real progress requires patience with quiet phases. Attention introduces people to you. Systems keep them connected. If there's no structure behind the attention, no message, no path, no next step, it fades without impact. Understanding this changes how you approach visibility. Instead of chasing spikes, you start building consistency. Instead of reacting to noise, you focus on direction. Instead of measuring success by moments, you measure it by momentum. That's how you escape the attention trap. And that's where real progress begins. Real progress usually doesn't look impressive from the outside. It doesn't always come with spikes, applause, or obvious wins. A lot of the time, it happens quietly, before the numbers reflect it. Real progress shows up as control. Control over your direction. Control over your output. Control over how people interact with your work. It shows up when your next move feels clearer than your last one. When you're not guessing every decision. When you're not constantly switching strategies. When your actions feel connected instead of scattered. That's progress. Real progress is when you understand why you're doing something, not just that you're doing it. You know who the work is for. You know what role each release plays. You know what success looks like at this stage. That clarity reduces pressure. You stop chasing every opportunity because you know which ones don't matter right now. You stop comparing timelines because you're focused on your own lane. You stop mistaking noise for movement. Another sign of real progress is sustainability. You're not burning out every few months. You're not disappearing and restarting. You're building rhythms you can maintain. That kind of progress compounds. Each step makes the next step easier. Each decision builds confidence instead of doubt. Each release strengthens your foundation instead of resetting it. Real progress isn't loud, but it's stable. And stability is what allows growth to eventually matter. When artists learn to recognize real progress, they stop chasing signals that don't serve them. They build patiently, they move intentionally, and they stop letting numbers decide their worth. That's when the independent path starts to feel real. This is something I've had to learn through experience. There were times when I celebrated growth because it felt like progress. Numbers were moving. Engagement looked healthy. People were paying attention. But when I looked closer, not much was actually changing. The attention didn't make decisions easier. It didn't create stability. It didn't reduce uncertainty. What it did was create pressure. Pressure to keep the numbers up. Pressure to repeat what performed well. Pressure to stay visible even when the direction wasn't clear. I had to slow down and ask myself what the growth was actually doing for me. Was it helping me build something sustainable? Or was it just feeding the ego? That question wasn't comfortable, but it was necessary. I realized that some of the progress I was chasing was cosmetic. It looked good from the outside, but it wasn't strengthening the foundation. At the same time, I was overlooking progress that mattered because it wasn't flashy. Clarity around my message. Better understanding of my audience. Stronger control over my process. Those things didn't show up in analytics, but they changed how I moved. Once I started valuing those shifts, everything slowed down, in a good way. I stopped reacting to every spike and drop. I stopped letting numbers dictate my confidence. I focused on building something that could last. That mindset didn't eliminate uncertainty, but it gave me control over it. And control is what turns growth into progress. If Independent Artist Game is helping you see the industry more clearly, the easiest way to support the movement is to like the video, share it with another artist, and subscribe. And if you want to support directly, you can grab merch at southentmusic.com. Everything there helps keep this series independent, consistent, and focused on the long game. Growth is a signal. Progress is a result. Independent artists who last learn how to tell the difference, and they build around progress instead of applause. Numbers going up can feel reassuring, but they don't automatically mean your foundation is stronger. They don't guarantee stability. They don't promise sustainability. Progress shows up when your next move feels clearer than your last one. When you understand why you're doing what you're doing. When your actions connect instead of scatter. When your effort compounds instead of resetting. That's the shift most artists never make. They chase growth because it's visible. They celebrate spikes because they're loud. They measure success by what's easiest to track. But the artists who build something real learn to value what lasts. They pay attention to clarity over clicks, control over chaos, direction over reaction. They don't ignore metrics. They interpret them correctly. They ask better questions. Is this helping me build leverage? Is this strengthening my connection? Is this making the next step easier? When the answer is yes, growth matters. When it's not, growth is just noise. Progress is quieter, but it's more powerful. It creates confidence that isn't tied to numbers. It builds systems that don't collapse when attention fades. It allows independence to feel intentional instead of fragile. If you can learn to recognize real progress, you stop chasing signals that don't serve you. You move with purpose. You protect your energy. You build patiently. And when growth finally arrives on top of that foundation, it actually means something. That's the difference. That's the discipline. That's the game.